development is disgusting and contrary to the interests of civilization. So it's more expensive rat poison.
I would short it if there was an easy way to do it.
And totally reprehensible money laundering activity.
Over the past decade, financial experts, reporters, and policymakers have continuously pounded the narrative that Bitcoin is risky, dangerous, bad for humans, and bad for the planet. They are wrong, and they are blinded mainly by their financial privilege. How financial privilege blinds dollar users to Bitcoin's importance. The critics cited above are all wealthy citizens of advanced economies, where they benefit from liberal democracy, property rights, free speech, a functioning legal system, and relatively stable reserve currencies like the dollar or pound. In reality, only 13% of our planet's population is born into the dollar, euro, Japanese yen, British pound, Australian dollar, Canadian dollar, or Swiss franc. The other 87% are born into autocracy, or considerably less trustworthy currencies. 4.3 billion people live under authoritarianism, and 1.2 billion people live under double or triple-digit inflation. Critics in the dollar bubble miss the bigger global picture, that anyone with access to the internet can now participate in Bitcoin, a new money system with equal rules for all participants, running on a network that does not censor or discriminate, used by individuals who do not need to show a passport or an ID, and held by citizens in a way that is hard to confiscate and impossible to debase. While Western headlines focus on Coinbase going public, Tesla buying billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, and tech bros getting fabulously rich, there's a quiet revolution happening worldwide. Until now, governments and corporations have controlled the rules of money. That is changing. Gates, Munger, and Buffett may have not recently dealt with conflict and violence, black markets, relentless inflation, political repression, and rampant corruption in their daily routine, but most do. Hey guys, I'm Drew. I turn the most important articles on Bitcoin into documentaries so more people can learn from them. This video was based on Check Your Financial Privilege, written by Alex Gladstein. Bitcoin in Nigeria. Iri Aderonokun is a Nigerian entrepreneur. When asked if Bitcoin is just helping the rich, Aderonokun laughed and said, "This is not the case at all. It is providing employment. It is helping people convert their naira to other currencies. It is enabling commerce where it was not previously possible. With the feminist coalition, it helps people overcome financial repression in the freezing of activist bank accounts. This is not," she said, "just a case of people sitting around watching the price." Last October, in the middle of nationwide protests against SARS, a notorious special police unit that was terrorizing citizens across the country, the feminist coalition began accepting donations via Flutterwave, a fintech product. This started off well enough, but then the regime started cracking down. Its bank accounts were shuttered. Bitcoin was the only option left. There was no other way to receive, store, and spend money. Aderonokun and her co-founders ended up setting up a BTC Pay server to process gifts from around the world in a way that avoided address reuse and protected donor privacy. Celebrities including Jack Dorsey shared the link, and they raised more than 7 Bitcoin. People saw that Bitcoin was cool and that the government could not stop it. Because of this, Aderonokun thinks that one day, Bitcoin will be talked about in the same way with the same importance as radio, the TV, and the internet. Bitcoin in Sudan. Mo, also known as Sudan Hodel, is a Sudanese doctor. He currently lives abroad in Europe, practicing medicine to support his family back home. Mo sees his country with brutally clear eyes. He described the capital of Khartoum as a crowded, diverse megacity, filled with pockets of extravagant wealth, surrounded by an enormous belt of poverty. It is a city of contradictions, he said, where palatial residences sit next to utter destitution. Mo has worked in Darfur, where he described the lack of development as simply stunning. There is no educational or health infrastructure. During his time there, he was one of 3 or 4 doctors treating hundreds of thousands of people. There was a total lack of primary care, and there were no pediatric hospitals. The national ruling class, he said, did not invest in these places. Warlords ultimately filled the power vacuum, with the youth choosing violence instead of school as a way to get ahead. Mo told a tortured history of his country, Sudan, he said, has been living through a vicious cycle of military coups and authoritarian rule ever since gaining its independence from the British Empire and losing its fragile first democracy. By 1983, military governments had allied themselves with the Muslim Brotherhood and imposed Sharia law, alienating the predominantly Christian and animist South. A democratic revolution in 1985 was short-lived, as Islamists led by Omar al-Bashir staged another coup in 1989, paving the way for 3 decades of his rule. Society was militarized and the intelligentsia were purged. Now if one spoke out against the regime, Mo said, they were not just speaking out against them, they were speaking out against Islam. They were against God himself. This gave Bashir an excuse for his brutality and new jihads against ethnic minorities. Minorities in South Sudan and Darfur had resisted authority from strongmen in faraway Khartoum. The seeds of this tension were planted in the 1950s when these populations fell under post-colonial Arab rule. Over time, these minority groups rebelled, only to be violently subjugated. The bloodshed peaked in Darfur in the early 2000s, when Bashir committed genocide, using the Janjaweed militias to murder hundreds of thousands and displace millions of people. This triggered the US and EU to increase sanctions against Sudan, cutting it off more deeply from the outside world. In addition to the extreme inequality on display in Khartoum, there is a bigger picture of low-income workers trying to catch up to high inflation, while those closer to the regime managed to do well. Infrastructure decayed and the average person suffered, while Bashir and his cronies loaded up on weapons, real estate, and foreign assets. Modern Sudan is another vivid and tragic example of the cancel-on effect. It was not always like this. Mo said that under the gold standard, 3 Sudanese pounds once bought $1. There was a middle class, and Khartoum was known as the London of North Africa. But in 1960, the Sudanese central bank took over and devalued the currency, the first instance of what would happen many times over the coming decades. When Bashir seized power in 1989, he installed a regime of economic terrorism. To instill fear in the population, he chose to make an example of a young man named Majdi Majjoub, who was a single child living at home looking after his elderly parents. A Christian minority in a community of traders, Majdi had possession of a few thousand US in his home, the result of many years of family commerce. Bashir created a new special economic division, a sort of secret police that would go home to home searching for foreign currency or gold. When the jackboot thugs came to Majdi's house, they found his savings and arrested him. After a show trial, he was hanged, sending a message to the population: if anyone tries to use anything but the Sudanese currency through our banking system, if anyone tries to own their own money, they will get the death sentence. Even today, according to Mo, many Sudanese are fearful of using dollars or storing money at home. The secret monetary police would spy on individuals, freeze bank accounts, confiscate assets, and impose made-up fees on merchants. No reasonable suspicion was required. Mo calls it a system of national extortion. Today, after a series of devaluations and constant inflation, a Sudanese pound will officially obtain around $0.0025. Imagine losing 95% of your savings in just the last 10 years. According to Mo, inflation is 340%. While the average citizen watched as their wages stagnated and living costs rose, Bashir and his cronies accumulated billions and saved them in foreign currencies, locked away in Swiss bank accounts. Today, the new Sudanese government is struggling to regain all that was looted and lost in the past 30 years. In the spring of 2019, in a stunning example of people power, the Sudanese population finally pushed out Bashir. Now, people like Mo are turning to Bitcoin. In 2015, Mo first heard about this mysterious internet money, as he put it, on YouTube. He spent countless hours watching Andreas Antonopoulos videos and read through The Internet of Money, which helped him understand the why behind the new currency. He started to use it while working abroad, exchanging euros for Bitcoin over PayPal on localbitcoins.com. He kept things small and mainly to himself, but in 2017, he started talking to family and friends. He told them, "This is going to be a part of our future." Many of them are now saving in Bitcoin. Where there were once financial walls cutting off Sudan from the world, Bitcoin has made bridges. It is now easy for Mo in Europe, to send money back to his friends and family, what once took days now takes minutes. And he does not have to trust any third parties or require his family to deal with thieves in government. Mo is beginning to see just how massive the Lightning Network will be for Sudan because most users will be in the micropayment space, sending transactions of $5 or $10, and will not be able to afford the increasingly high on-chain fees. If international exchanges can choose to service Sudan and enable Lightning withdrawals and deposits, he said that would be an enormous step forward for financial empowerment. As for the likes of Bill Gates and Buffett, Mo said they might understand the technology behind Bitcoin, but they will never be happy about it because it is coming to seize a place on the global stage that they used to have just for themselves. In direct contradiction to billionaire claims that Bitcoin is worthless and has no social value, Mo knows many Sudanese who rely on it as a lifeline. Maybe, Mo said, the critics just cannot see past their financial privilege. One of the darkest moments in his life was in 2013 after a peaceful political uprising was completely crushed. Mo left all social media. He could not bear to look at the bloody images and videos streaming from the violence. But now, with twin political and economic transformations, he sees the light at the end of the tunnel. When people say Bitcoin is hope, he says that he agrees. Bitcoin in Ethiopia. Kal Kasa is an Ethiopian businessman. In a country of close to 120 million people, more than 70% of the population has no access to a bank account. This is a place, he said, where there are still communities that use salt for money. Kasa estimated salaries in urban areas have perhaps doubled over the past decade, but goods have gone up by 3 to 5 times. Since inflation is so high and such a constant phenomenon, the upper classes use the dollar as their unit of account. But outside of the cities, people still account with, and their living standards fall with, the birr. In rural areas, people use cattle or sheep to store value. If they can, they obtain gold, which is rare and still considered very precious. Dollars are officially illegal. Kasa's brother was arrested and imprisoned once simply because he had $20 in his pocket. In Ethiopia, people are jailed for the crime of using better currency. In this weak environment, Ethiopians are forced to buy government bonds, which, as Kasa dryly noted, have negative real interest rates. They are, as he put it, donations for the state. Kasa was born in Ethiopia, but left as a young child, growing up in California. He moved back at the end of 2013. He lived there until last summer when the government shut off the internet. Kasa's phone could still send SMS messages and make calls, but there was no data. The regime justified this as a defense against rebellions, but especially during the pandemic lockdown, this got old very quickly. So, last summer, wearing just a backpack, he got on a plane and headed back to the US. Today, Kasa has created Telegram groups where he pays freelancers, graphic designers, and translators based in Ethiopia with Bitcoin. In America, he said, most people treat Bitcoin as an investment or as a savings account, but he's using it as a medium of exchange and payment too. It is easier and cheaper, and now a part of his life. Kasa is focused on the Lightning Network, and he uses it to pay his contacts in Ethiopia. He helps them set up the open source, free Blue wallets, and pays them directly with Lightning. He's amazed at how easy it is, and how it transmits hard value instantly halfway across the world. On the other end, his contacts use Blue Wallet as their savings accounts, and they exchange locally into birr when they need to in peer-to-peer markets. This, he said, is hugely preferable to Western Union and birr-denominated accounts, where, for example, on a recent payment, Kasa had to pay $13 to send $100. When Kasa pays his colleagues, he pays them the full amount rather than paying through the government exchange rate where authorities steal a portion. His contacts are their own banks, and no one can debase or remotely confiscate their funds. This, Kasa said, is a revolution. Kasa said the biggest obstacle to Bitcoin adoption in Ethiopia might be the false promise of alternative cryptocurrencies. In particular, he has identified Cardano as a threat. In a recent video, the currency's creator spoke about working with the Ethiopian regime to incorporate 5 million students onto the Cardano blockchain, and boasts that they then could be tracked with metadata throughout their life and career. Our vision and goals, he said, are directly in line with the goals of the Ethiopian government. In contrast, Casa is glad that Bitcoin's goals are not in line with the aims of the thieves and bureaucrats who run his country. He worried that many may fall prey to schemes like Cardano. 75% of the population of Ethiopia is under the age of 27. Once they start using Bitcoin, Casa thinks they will spread the technology quickly to friends and family. Adoption will not take decades, but years. When asked if he is worried about the government cracking down on Bitcoin, he said that it will be hard to get in the middle of a hardworking Ethiopian and a better life. The population is young, agile, creative, and adapting. It will not be stopped. People, he said, are sick of poverty and earning money only to see it depreciate. Today, Ethiopians are at war with each other. We are fighting ourselves, Casa said. If we are willing to kill each other to solve our problems, we will definitely be willing to try Bitcoin as an alternative. And that, he thinks, will be a peaceful revolution. After reading the stories of Adrenican, Mo, and Casa, and witnessing how Bitcoin is so valuable to people outside of the dollar bubble, compare this with what Munger, Buffett, Gates, and others say about Bitcoin. That is something with no social value. That it will just get people's hopes up, only to let them down.
Disgusting. Rat poison.
I would short it if there was an easy way to do it.
Totally reprehensible.
For most people, it is the government that lets people down. It is the government that is reprehensible. Liberation technologies should be invested in, not shorted. And for those comfortable in the dollar bubble, it's time to check your financial privilege. Hey guys, Drew again. If you like this video, subscribing really helps out. Let me know if you want me to make more videos like this. Thanks everyone.